Hello, my name is Micaiah Cabasa, and today I'll be presenting the Contemporary Business Leader presentation. So this is just kind of the outline of what today's presentation will look like. I will start by discussing the business leader that I've decided to interview, the application of leadership theory, the greatest career achievement of my chosen leader, a challenge that my leader faced and how they overcame it. I will then go into the power bases and the impact of the leader's chosen behavior. Following that will be the leadership style comparison between the leader I've chosen and also another leader that I wanted to compare them to. Following that will be some leadership lessons, both of what I learned personally from them, but also leadership lessons from the person I interviewed. And finally, some reflections after the interview. So first, I decided to interview my manager from where I work here on campus. Her name is Emmeline Schakowsky. That took some practice. But her official position is a campus visitation coordinator. So where I work is the Antelope Reception Center. It was recently under GCU, but recently switched to be under Grand Canyon Education. And I thought that this organization best aligned with hospitality, just because with the campus visitation, there are a lot of prospective families and students coming onto campus. So you really have to cater to these families and students. We also work very closely with Discover students, where students are actually staying on campus, hence the hospitality aspect of that. And Emmeline has been working in that position for about 1.5 years. Next, there were three application of leadership theories that I thought Emmeline most emulated. So I'll go through all three, kind of give a short description, and then we'll move on from there. So the first is democratic. The democratic leadership style focuses a lot more on just like getting a lot of feedback from different employees and then moving forward. It is definitely more task oriented, but there is this aspect where employees are being looked at and cared for. And I just thought Emmeline very closely aligned with this, just because with a lot of big decisions that come into our place of work, she's very often trying to get feedback, not just from the employees, but from different departments. She'll get feedback from even the families and prospective students that we're serving. And I always see her trying to incorporate other people's feedback and opinion when moving forward with different decisions. The next leadership theory I think she emulates quite a bit is servant leadership. And further on in the presentation, I'll focus a little bit more on where this is seen most. But while interviewing Emmeline, she talked a lot about really connecting with employees and creating an environment that was more focused on cohesiveness and just encouragement and just a fun workplace rather than just a place where you work. So she really focused on being a leader in the fact that if she serves our student workers, then they will in turn want to serve the families and prospective students that come in. And then finally, I thought she emulated the house's path goal leadership. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about the application of the leadership theories that she possesses. Next, the greatest career achievement that Emmeline found in this position was when she facilitated a company transition from GCU to GCE. So as mentioned before, the ARC, or the Antelope Reception Center, was recently under GCU, or Grand Canyon University. At the start of this school year, they actually announced that we would be transitioning to Grand Canyon Education. So for context, Grand Canyon University is the university nonprofit. GCE, Grand Canyon Education, is a for-profit company, excuse me. So in order for that transition to take place, there was a lot of behind the scenes work that Emmeline had to do. First, there was a lot of HR things that she had to handle. Of course, we do have an HR department, but because she is the main manager, she did have to make sure that everything was running smoothly and that students were easily being transitioned over to that company, excuse me, student workers. Another big achievement that coincided with this is that she actually took on a new role. So originally at the ARC, there were 3 different managers. They all specialized in different areas. But when this transition took place, 2 of those managers were actually placed in different departments within our admissions department at GCU, and she became the main leader for campus visitations. So it definitely was a great achievement on her part because she was able to take on a lot more responsibility and was still able to make sure that everything was running smoothly. Now over to its impact. One thing that Emmeline mentioned was operations did continue to run smoothly, which is really a big deal just because when there's such a big transition taking place, sometimes it can get a little messy. But actually, Emmeline started implementing family surveys at the end of tours just to get some feedback from families and students to see how our tours were doing. All of the feedback was very, very positive. So she attributes this to that, again, achievement and success of transitioning the company over to GCE. And again, as mentioned before, she did take on the role of what used to be 3 managers' responsibilities, but now all into one. Next, there was both a servant leadership and conscious leadership aspect to her serving or to her leading, especially when focused with this achievement. So the first one is servant leadership. So out of 50 total points, she did score 41 out of 50. Some of the highest things that she ranked in was conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, and commitment to growth of people. And some of the lowest ones were healing and empathy. Now, to elaborate a little bit more on this, and just for some context, Emmeline was not a business major by any means. She studied psychology. So some things in the interview questioning process were sometimes lost, some of that information. But from what she did understand, she did emulate a lot of those servant leadership roles. She did have to really ensure that all of her student workers were taken care of during this transition. It was very interesting just because a lot of employees are being moved around to different locations. And Emmeline just mentioned that during that transition, there was a lot of checking in with people and making sure they still felt known and seen and valued, just because when there are big transitions that take place, people can sometimes get lost. So she definitely had to make sure she was still stewarding those relationships, that she was still committed to growing these student workers to not just be normal workers, but actually just have a desire and passion for working there. Now over to conscious leadership, Emmeline scored a 57 out of 60. Some of these, the highest ones, not all of them were included, but where she ranked 5 out of 5 possible points were ownership, passion for creativity and innovation, hiring and developing best talent, and timely execution of decisions. So again, during this big transition, she had to make sure she was being creative and innovative. She had to really develop and in some cases hire some new talent. And she did have to make a lot of decisions in a timely manner. Some of the lowest ones, they were actually the lowest ones were actually ranked as 4 out of 5. So still pretty high, but just low in comparison to the rest. 2 of those were commitment to operational excellence, and the second was commitment to continuous learning and personal growth. Next, handling a challenge. Emmeline mentioned there was an incident where 10,000 student IDs went missing and they were needed within 2 weeks. So part of the organization that we work for or that department, I should say, part of that responsibility is printing student IDs and making sure students have IDs. So when they come onto campus or are accessing different things, they have that ID. But 10,000 went missing. And the way that Emmeline handled this was actually utilizing her network within GCU. So she distributed a lot of different tasks to neighboring departments. She really pulled into and leaned into that network that she had with other managers, because she had to really collaborate with others to make sure this task was completed. And I said that Emmeline showed more of a managerial role in this setting, because instead of leading and inspiring people, it was a lot more facilitating and distributing tasks. And for servant leadership, she scored a 30 out of 50, a lot lower, just because I think in this instance, since it was so timely, only 2 weeks, it was less of encouraging, inspiring, and creating passion with student workers, and it was more of just ensuring that tasks were being completed. And she really took on that authoritative role and figure, just to again ensure that everything was being taken care of. The next, conscious leadership, 55 out of 60, again very high. We can look at some of these top highest things that she ranked in, and then some of her lowest as well. Now for power bases. So I said that Emmeline used both a position and personal power base. Now for positional, I said she used more legitimate. So she definitely leaned into her role as a manager in her title when needed. And then for personal, she used a lot of connection. So she had to make sure that she was using her network with different departments to get the task done. Now for its impact, it created a very quick and efficient system to log and track IDs, which was the goal. She used her connections to accomplish the challenge, and finally, she utilized creative problem-solving skills to achieve the task. Now for leadership style comparison. So I have Emmeline on one side, my manager, and then I decided to do some research on Colleen Barrett. She was a CEO of the Sky West Airlines, I believe. Sorry, I may have butchered that name. But yes, and I'll talk about both of the leadership styles. So for Emmeline, I said that overall she demonstrated more of a democratic leadership style, just because she still cared about employees and their feedback, but she was also very task-oriented. Some of these pros and strengths of this was that she's more efficient with timely matters, like the challenge she faced earlier that I mentioned. She did have to make sure that she was just being very timely with things. So that was very nice when using that democratic style. Some negatives is that sometimes it can overlook employee needs. So of course, democratic is seen as asking for feedback from employees, but typically that feedback is concerning a specific task, not their overall well-being in that position at that organization. So that again can create some issues, because it's not always as relational in this aspect as other styles. Now for Colleen Barrett, some pros. Her goal with using servant leadership was to create a more cohesive and encouraging work environment. So of course that is a very big strength, because if you get employees to enjoy what they're doing, it doesn't matter what they're doing, if they're working for an airline or working with campus visitation, they will be excited to work there. So of course she would serve her employees, and in response, they would want to serve the people that they're working with. Some negatives is that it is a slower process to achieve. So with servant leadership, it does take time to build that relationship to actually inspire and transform the people that you're leading. So if there were any timely issues that were to come about, you can't always go straight to the servant leadership approach and expect it to work immediately, especially if you're either a new manager or you have some new employees and you don't have that bond and connection yet. So again, it is a slower process. So some entrepreneurial mindset and company mission. So GCU's mission, since technically Emily does work under GCU's mission statement, is focuses a lot on innovation and creating change and transforming people. And this was coincided very much with the entrepreneurial mindset, just because, as Emmeline mentioned, while interviewing her, you have to look for new ways to be creative, to innovate, to make sure that we're always keeping things operational, being creative, and just rolling with the punches. Some behaviors that I would like to emulate myself that I saw in Emmeline was first a conscious leadership and entrepreneurial mindset. And I said I would probably want to use these traits most likely when there's big transitions, because you do have to be very innovative and always think about what else could happen. You have to be very, again, conscious of your employees and making sure that they're well taken care of, but again, still focusing on the task. And then servant leadership, I said this would be to more facilitate the relational side of working with employees. And I think both of these approaches are all very important to have when you're leading someone. And some lessons. So I chose Emmeline, just one, because I did have a personal connection with her. And I knew that by always working with her and seeing changes that the company had faced, I was able to be very observant in that and see how she was handling things. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of get her point of view in that. And then with Colleen Barrett, I was looking through a lot of the leaders listed, and I just really felt a big connection to Colleen Barrett's leadership style, just because it is servant leadership style. She talks about loving to have fun in the workplace and just really making sure that her employees felt seen. And I just wanted to do a little bit more research on that. Some challenges I faced. It was somewhat difficult to interview Emmeline, just because she had a hard time communicating the different leadership styles she used. And I think that's very common, because especially if you don't have all this knowledge of the terminology and everything, it can be hard to really communicate that. And a follow-up question I asked was to Emmeline, it was, were you actively looking for a leadership style to emulate? And she answered, no, you kind of just roll with it and adapt as you go with it. Something I learned, so I did ask Emmeline a follow-up question, just asking her, like, what's the best leadership advice you have? What's the biggest thing you learned? And she said, expect change. It's the only thing that's constant. So with everything that she talked about, whether it was her achievement or challenge, you didn't always see it coming. So you just have to know that change is on its way, and you have to be ready to adapt and be flexible and adopt different leadership styles for the setting. Sometimes you have the time to be more relational with your employees. Other times you have to focus somewhere on the task if there's a pressing deadline. And these are my references I used. And yes, thank you so much for sitting with me as I do this presentation.